Well, it's 1:30 and it's great to see so many folks joining and logging in as we're getting started here. And I think perhaps we will start on time and just allow folks to trickle in and join us as they can. So welcome everyone to the second Women in Water lecture series for 2021. My name is Dr. Andrea Rowe, and I am the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Specialist at the Global Institute for Water Security and Global Water Futures at the University of Saskatchewan, and your host for today's Women in Water lecture series on sustainable ecosystems. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are all participating from today from the traditional territories of First Peoples across this country. The University of Saskatchewan is located in Saskatoon on Treaty 6 traditional territory of the Cree and homeland of the Métis. Please take a moment with yourself to acknowledge the land where you live and work and give appreciation for the setting of today's positive discussion. I'd like to just go over a couple of quick logistics for today's event. You are able to listen in French if you would like by clicking on the interpretation button, which is a globe in the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, and selecting the French option, and you'll be able to hear French there. In addition, we have closed captioning provided, and if you would like to access that, please press the live CC button also in the bottom right corner of the Zoom screen. The event will be approximately 1 hour long, and it is being recorded in both English and French and will appear on the GWF website following today's event. And it will last in the last 20 minutes of today's talk. We will also have opportunity for the audience to ask questions of our guests today. And so please think up your questions. Feel free to put them in the chat as we go along, and we will do our best to make sure that the speakers have the opportunity to answer your questions. I would also like to take the opportunity to recognize our sponsors and guests today. So thank you very much to Global Water Futures, the Global Water Futures Young Professionals Program, the Global Institute for Water Security, for committing the resources to make the entire Women in Water series a reality. And also especially to our virtual audience today, everyone who's joining, but also the young professionals watching from the University of Saskatchewan, Laurier, Waterloo, and McMaster. And we'd also like to extend a particular welcome to those people joining us today from the GW4 Water Security Alliance, which is the UK's largest water research consortium. And so with those housekeeping details out of the way, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Women in Water series before introducing our speakers for today. The Women in Water series, the lecture series, was conceived in response to the recognition that we need more opportunities to showcase women who are researchers in water science and provide leadership opportunities for young professionals. It was also conceived to draw attention to the gendered nature of research and the need to include gender-based analysis in our research. And it's very interesting because today, February 11th, 2021, marks the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. And the theme for 2021 is the women and girls on the forefront of the fight against COVID-19. And although this has been a particularly difficult now more than 1 year for many people around the world, we feel very fortunate to have this platform today to raise the profile of women in science. UNESCO data finds that less than 30% of researchers worldwide are women, and thus it's very important to create spaces like Women in Water where we are able to gather and not only learn from women who are experts in their field, but also to create the opportunity for the next generation of researchers to ask questions, engage in dialogue, and experience a sense of belonging in science and research. Each of our lectures focuses on a specific water-related theme, and today's structured conversation will focus on sustainable ecosystems. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has recently collated key messages around gender and natural resources in a series of briefs. In short, the bottom line is that gender differences exist in terms of knowledge, access, roles, responsibilities, rights, and benefits within the context of sustainable ecosystems. Further, social, cultural, economic, institutional, and legal barriers prevent women from engaging in good governance, and defending environmental rights can mean disproportionate levels of personal risk to women and Indigenous peoples. Our guests have been working together for the past few weeks to build a dialogue between each other that highlights both their research and their experience on this topic. And so with that said, we're delighted to have with us today Isabelle Durrance and Jared Wolfe. Isabelle Durrance is a professor at Cardiff School of Biosciences. Her research focuses on three key areas: the role of river biodiversity in sustaining key ecosystem services, the role of landscape processes in driving freshwater ecosystems, the impact of global change on freshwater ecosystems. Isabelle believes that interdisciplinary research is necessary to find solutions to current environmental challenges and aims to foster collaborations between academics and stakeholders through her different roles. She is the director of Cardiff Water Research Institute, the GW4 Water Security Alliance, and the GW4 Fresh Center for Doctoral Training. Welcome, Isabelle. We're glad to have you here today. And our event host for today is Jared Wolfe. Jared is the project manager for the Prairie Water Project under the Global Water Futures Program and is based out of the University of Saskatchewan's Global Institute for Water Security. He's an aquatic ecosystems ecologist with an interest in exploring how the interaction among science, policy, and management can promote sustainable water resources. Jared also sits on the national board for the Sierra Club of Canada Foundation and the regional director for the Prairie region. Within this role, he serves on the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion National Committee that aims to operationalize principles of diversity and inclusion in organizing programming at national and local levels. So thank you so much. Welcome, Isabelle and Jared. We're really looking forward to your discussion. And so I'll hand it over to Jared, who will begin by sharing a little bit about his own work and what brings him to his interest in sustainable ecosystems. And he and Isabelle will have a conversation for about the next 40 minutes before we break into questions and answers.
Excellent.
Over to you.
Thanks, Andrea. I will share my screen. Okay. All right. Are you seeing everything okay? Excellent. All right. So thanks, everyone. As Andrea introduced me before, my name is Jared Wolfe. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a project manager working out of the Global Institute for Water Security at the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm very honored to be here and be able to participate in this conversation, particularly as the host, but also as a young professional representative. In preparing for this presentation, I was thinking about how to approach sustainable ecosystems within this forum. And as I'm starting out my professional journey and reflecting on representation in science, this is an area that's becoming increasingly important for me as I'm approaching, as I'm developing in my career, but also I think as to be reflective in the next generation of scientists as well. And I think as we think about this conversation more widely, and particularly over the last year, this is getting a lot more attention. And I think it's really encouraging to see that these conversations are happening more widely, because we do need to have we need to be engaging all persons and across disciplines to be tackling some of these larger questions. So I'm really happy to be able to participate within this discussion and within this forum. So for today, what I wanted to do was just to give a brief introduction to my research background and give a couple of vignettes about some of my work and how they relate to the theme of sustainable ecosystems, and also acknowledging that a lot of this work comes from the Global Institute for Water Security, and more specifically Global Water Futures and Prairie Water, which is the project that I work on. So as Andrea mentioned in my bio, professionally, I identify as an aquatic ecologist, although I think that identity is constantly evolving as well. My background is in biology. I always had an interest in nature, and particularly water. And as I'm also interested in processes and relationships, so how components of systems interact and the feedback cycles that occur. So that's naturally kind of led me towards investigating ecosystems, and more specifically, lakes. And so here I show, excuse me, two examples of lakes that I worked on. So the left is a prairie lake, and then there's a boreal lake on the right. And these are two very important areas that or systems I've worked in that are very contrasting, but represent, I think, different eras within my research past and present, I guess. But I guess over the last few years, I've switched the field work to working more within a computer and studying watersheds using GIS. As a project manager for the Prairie Water Project, I have the opportunity to be able to work on a number of different aspects of research related to water security. However, my heart, I think, is still within these ecosystems. So in particular, working in prairie pothole wetlands, for example. I still also get to go out in, I guess, the quote unquote field, but I've switched. These fields are now more communities and people. So I work in I do a lot of my work in collaboration, facilitating collaboration in science and knowledge mobilization. So this leads me to the two vignettes that I kind of want to share with you today. The first one is probably more of that natural scientist approach or perspective. So watershed classifications and modeling, looking at indicators of change. And then second, I want to touch on thinking about sustainable ecosystems, the role that collaboration and knowledge mobilization and networks have as we think about sustainability. So much of my work now takes a landscape view of ecosystems, and with the application of looking at environmental change and impacts to, and the resulting impacts to water security. One of the main projects that I've worked on is a prairie-wide classification of watersheds that classifies watersheds according to their geography. For any of you that have visited the prairies, we often think of the prairies as all the same in many cases, all flat, all agricultural land, but that's actually not quite the case. They're actually quite heterogeneous, and due to this difference in landscapes, there can be differences in what we might predict could be responses of these watersheds or landscapes to change, like climate change or land use change. In particular, in the prairies, wetland drainage is a topic of concern. So what my work has been doing is classifying these these landscapes into typical representative classes. And then we can use modeling approaches to develop what we're calling a virtual modeling system. So in addition to the prairies being very heterogeneous, we also don't have a lot of a comprehensive monitoring framework that can help us with capturing some of this heterogeneity. So this is why we're using modeling to help replace that. So trying to generalize behaviors of these landscapes to then link changes in hydrology and climate and land use to aspects of water chemistry and quality and biodiversity. So then we can then look at scenarios of change and see how does land use impact these more holistic responses to watersheds, I guess. And the final story I want to share today is I'd like to touch on the topic of collaboration, knowledge mobilization, and sustainability. So I would say there's an increasing need and role of scientists to be moving out of that proverbial, I guess, ivory tower and working with communities and people. And I think that this is in response to some of these pressing concerns that we're seeing in the environmental field and sustainability. So things like climate change and land use, for example, and these are concerns and questions that stakeholders have that we as scientists can really help to facilitate that. Mobilizing that research off of the shelf and in publications and really getting it into where it can have practice and use. I would also note with this is that this is mutually beneficial. So for scientists and researchers, by doing this type of work, you can gain a better understanding of your science by embedding it with on-the-ground challenges that face sustainability. So you get to learn, I guess, how water security in this case looks different across different sectors and people and communities. And this gives you a better appreciation of the different types of challenges and questions, as well as a generation of a more holistic view of finding solutions. And I think that this also adds a lot of value to the work as well. In particular, for example, I'll do a little bit of a plug, is a painting that we generated in trying to do some of this work. So I include a little QR code that will link you to the website that get you more of an understanding of those stories and ways in which people can engage together. And I would say, as I'm navigating my early career, this collaboration and knowledge mobilization are very important skills for the next generation of scientists to have. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to my introduction. And I'd now like to pass on the stage to Dr. Durrance to be able to provide some of her expertise and story.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Jared. And thank you so much also for inviting me to this event. I'm very flattered. So I'll follow on from Jared's very inspiring talk to talk a bit about another approach to ecosystems, but very similar, in fact. And if I am going to try and share my screen and get you there, hopefully everybody can see this. Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. So I think what's really exciting in ecosystem science in general is that there are many ways to go about it, but it's about life. It's about life, and it's about our relationship to the natural world around us. And one ecosystem that I find absolutely fascinating is freshwaters. They're a perfect model ecosystem because they essentially link the land, the sea, and they are so much part of what we are, the way that we relate to nature. And really, if you look at, this is an image of Wales where I work. They really feel like the bloodline, the veins through our land that nourish us. And so I find freshwaters very inspiring. They're a fantastic model ecosystem, but they're also very, very inspiring. And I can't move my screen. Let's try that. And one of the things that really struck me was that a few years ago now, I was involved in an exercise at UK level, which was the National Ecosystem Assessment. And it was very much like the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. I'm guessing all of you must have heard about it. But what was absolutely staggering working with the team who produced the UK version of this ecosystem assessment was how many kilometers of rivers we had just in the UK. But very sadly, how there were none of those were completely pristine. And they were, you could see they were fragmented, they were disconnected from their catchments, both vertically and horizontally. And it was a very sad story. And the sad story with that was also the fact that it was very clear from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, but also from the UK version, that had a huge impact on our life, not just on biodiversity, not just on rivers, but on our everyday life. And since then, this is really something that has sort of grabbed my research attention. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is that interface between people and nature. And when you're an ecosystem scientist, one of the things that sort of has given a voice to thinking about nature in a different way has been this notion of ecosystem services. And for those who are not very familiar with it, the principle is that when you have a functioning system, as in, a river, for example, it gives us so much. It gives us resources like fresh water. It contributes to our health. It contributes social, cultural, educational benefits, as well as supporting a strong economy by providing us with food and fiber and all sorts of other things. But that's when the ecosystem is functioning properly. So what happens when the ecosystem service fails? And the ecosystem usually fails when we manage our landscapes or watersheds for things that have a very strong market value. And that's usually food or fiber. And we usually manage those to the detriment of all sorts of other things, which means that the ecosystem actually fails. And when the ecosystem fails, well, what we get is what we can also refer to as disservices. What we get is water that is so polluted that it requires huge amounts to treat it. What we get is water that cannot access naturally floodplains or upper areas. And then you get floods that have destructive power or have very strong impact on ourselves and our economies. So the idea here is that with the notion of ecosystem services is how can you increase the services that nature can provide without destroying our natural capital and therefore reducing the public costs that come from degraded natural services like the natural cleaning of water, that reduces risks from failing natural ecosystems in general. And that's what I find is really, really exciting and key to sustaining to ecosystem sustainability. But you need to convince people. You need to convince people that those services, they are produced not just by the fact that they are rivers, but the fact that they are living organisms in these rivers. And that we can't just consider these rivers as a nice, convenient transport system or sewage system, that if we want all the benefits that this system can provide, we need to be able to demonstrate that there is a tangible, quantifiable link between biodiversity in these rivers and the services that they provide. And that's not a given because it's really complex. And so the questions you could ask is, for example, consider fish. They're an interesting ecosystem service. They provide cultural value. They provide the possibility to go on fishing. But how on earth do you relate that to biodiversity? Do you relate it to the number of the abundance of prey in fish? Do you relate it to the genetic makeup of these fish? Do you relate it to how the food web functions? Are there special traits you should look at? How on earth do you measure that? And we set up a group of interdisciplinary group of scientists, ecologists, geographers, social scientists, and we went about for 3-4 years essentially and collected a huge amount of data. And one of the fascinating things about the results that we got from this big project was that a lot of the sustainability of these ecosystems and therefore the ecosystem services that they provided was very much linked to energy flows. When energy flows, as in the energy that's captured by the sun, from the sun, by vegetation that ends up in the rivers, and that sort of feeds this whole food chain that provides us with these services. when this energy flow isn't impeded, we have sustainable ecosystem services. But the good news is that, and Jared was pointing that out earlier on, is that, well, we can manage those landscapes to help those energy flows. And what's really interesting, however, is that it's actually more complex than we think it is. And one of the fascinating things I thought in that research was the fact that it's actually really difficult to define what an ecosystem service is and exactly what you need to quantify, whether you need to quantify, for example, in the case of fish, you need to quantify the juveniles or the potential use of your service, which is the fact that there are fish in there, or the actual use of it, which is how many fish you get out, or just the benefits, whatever they are, license sales, the health impact, all you can think of. It's really, really complex. And what makes it even more complex is that for any given service that somewhere provides, there are multiple users, and the notion of service varies between individuals. If we take the example of fish, some people might find the service comes into being able to fish, but others might think it's in being able to watch them or learn from them. And what we found fascinating also is that the notion of ecosystem service actually varies with every individual, and it varies in multiple ways. It varies in terms of that everyone comes into the world with shared values that are inherited by our own cultures, and what we have learned from our parents and the generations before. They change through time, whether you're a child or an adult or a more elderly person. Your perception of what is a service of nature may change. And then, of course, the perception of a service, whether you're an individual or a group or a community of groups or the whole society, that, of course, also changes. So being able to get everybody to come to a consensus on how to manage the land and our watersheds to provide for everyone while being able to trade off is a really, really important challenge that I don't think we've quite nailed, but there's fantastic research to do about that. So I'll stop there just to give you a bit of food for thought, and I'll let Jared continue.
Thanks, Isabel. I'll actually pick up on that last subject and talk about this idea of ecosystem services, because as you point out, the way that we frame ecosystem services or evaluate them can be complex and vary by perspective and culture, and as you mentioned, social organization. And so I'm wondering, you say that it's complicated at this point, but do you have any, and like as we move up, it gets even harder when we think about trade-offs and all those. So do you have any suggestions or advice as to how we might be able to grapple with some of that complexity and how we start considering cultural ecosystem services and the management of biological resources?
I think it's a really challenging, it's a really challenging research question, and I think there is a huge amount of work that we still need to do. And thinking today is a special Women and Girls Day, and I think what's really interesting also is to realize that the perception of the value of nature or services that nature provides really also varies, for example, with gender. Depending on why you depend on nature or how you depend on nature, whether it's you depend on nature because you want your watershed to provide you with clean water, and because you're a woman and you want to go and get some clean water as close as possible to your house, because that is what you do during the day. Or whether you're a man and you need to bring in fish to sell to the market because that is your job. Those are therefore very different considerations that need to be taken together, and I don't think we have a good grasp on that yet.
Yeah, and it gets complex as you start thinking about like the intersectional nature of that, right? And how do we kind of grapple with some of that those management questions? And yeah, it's very complex. And actually maybe picking up a little bit and moving from that. So within, and I'm thinking about the Prairie region in particular, we have there's a number of research endeavors that have been looking at ecosystem services and how can we use this to like enhance, I guess, how we better manage ecosystems within this region, and even use them to help connect across different communities. With some of the work that you've done in the UK, do you have any advice as to how researchers are looking to get into this field and study ecosystem services as a tool and applying it to a new landscape? Do you have any advice that you could be able to offer in that regard?
Yeah, I think when you start a career in that field, I think it's really important to connect with others who are working on similar topics, and that's one thing that you can do, of course, with conference and talks. But there are also other ways to get into that, and there's, for example, an ecosystem service partnership, which is a really nice community that brings together ecosystem service academics and practitioners, and there's a really strong opportunities, I think, at the moment to be able to launch in that field.
And finding those connections and really learning from the
connections.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I'll move now from maybe the more research focused stuff and think more about the topic, I guess, of today, which is women and girls in science, and talk about women in science. And you were a recipient of the Daphne Jackson charity, and I'll maybe allow you the chance to give more of a description of their role and their mandate. But just briefly, it's a UK-based charity that helps support women and returners to return to science after a career break, and this helped to transition you back into research. I'm wondering if you could give a bit of information and comment on what it felt and what it meant to have that type of support.
Yeah, I think one of the fascinating things about being able to, when for some reason you stop your career, whether it's to look after children, whether it's to care for someone else, somebody in your family, and actually whether you're a woman or a man, it doesn't really matter. I think when you have a break in your career, in academia, it's really difficult to get back on. And it's really difficult to get back on because things move at such a pace and you lose contact with your peers, you lose contact with your networks, you lose contact with the literature. And so it's really difficult to get back in after a while. And the fantastic thing about the Daphne Jackson Fund was that it was created to help women and men go back into science after a career break, which is what I did. I had a 4-year career break. And the most important part of that I found was was not so much the network and etc., because you sort of make it back, but it's getting back that confidence in yourself. And I think when you stop for a while, you sort of feel more like an imposter and you lose that confidence. And I think that societies like that, but it's not the only options. There are lots of different ways to go about it. Are a fantastic way of just putting you back on your feet by just giving you back your confidence. I wouldn't be here otherwise. Well, not talking to you at least.
Yeah, building that confidence, yes, the imposter syndrome too, and I feel as if that's a conversation that lots of people have been having lately, even as young professionals that are still part of the whole and developing their career, right? So having those external supports is really beneficial. I guess, do you have any other advice when it comes to people who are looking to return back into science? Do you have any advice as to how to connect and what supports to seek?
Yeah, I think it's important also to realize that there are different ways of progressing in life, and if I can share with you just two slides. I will show you what I mean. I'm going to try and show this to you. There you are. Can you see my slides? Fantastic. Yeah, so well, what I'm trying to illustrate here is that I had a pathway in life, and I'd like you, Jared, to give us also a bit of your pathway in life. But I had a pathway in life where I didn't really make up my mind very easily. I started off by doing maths, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to go into agriculture, and then I ended up in a agro industry making yogurts. And then I had my first child, and decided actually what I wanted to do was not work in the industry because you have stupid hours. So I did a PhD in landscape ecology, and then I went and did a stint in the geography, and then I had a career break, and I came back into freshwater ecosystems. And what I've learned doing that sort of zigzagging is that in fact, you're always presented with these examples of very linear pathways, career pathways, where everything just, what some researchers call the ladder progression. But there are other ways of getting somewhere or achieving what you want to do, what you're interested in. And these more varied paths for growth and development, which some researchers call lattice pathways, I think really demonstrate that it's not always the best solution to just go straight on, and that when you zigzag, you learn lots of other skills as you go, whether it's skills of how to make sure your children don't do silly things and get on with their lives. All these skills that you accumulate when you're going slowly or even backwards. You may feel backwards, but actually what you're doing is you're accumulating all this experience, and that experience is always valuable. You always get to use it, whether it's because you've changed disciplines, whether you've stopped and started again. And I think there is a real, even when you go really slowly, I think it's when you're going slowly that you get in most information. It's like, when you're on the motorway, you don't really see the landscape, but when you're going on your bicycle, you see the landscape. And I think that it's one thing I've learned is that, well, there are lots of different ways to get there, and I've really enjoyed that, actually, that diversity, and I think it's I think we need to be diverse and all have different ways of getting there. But I know I'll stop sharing. And I know, Jared, that you've had quite a zigzaggy interdisciplinary career. So maybe you want to tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I can do a little bit. I mean, albeit I've been mainly in research and academia, but I know that we'll start taking some general questions right away, so I'll make it quick. But as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, that my identity's kind of switched around a little bit, and I started off in cell biology, and then I kind of moved up into like an organismal ecology, and then lakes and ecosystems, and now kind of working with people and socio-ecological systems. And at times I felt self-conscious about looking kind of like unfocused, but and it kind of looking at it looks unfocused, I guess, from the latter point of view that you bring. But as you mentioned, but as you look at the lattice one, that diversity is really helpful, and that's something I've really come to be very proud of, or recognizing those benefits, right? Because if you look at ecosystems, you have to go all the way down to microorganisms, which require you to start thinking about things like cells and all of those processes. And as you build up to humans, it's basically a huge ecological system, right? So it's this diversity that I think is really useful, and interdisciplinary points of view are really helpful when looking at questions related to sustainability. So I really appreciate the literature that you drew from there and that experience, and it's really gives perspective.
It does, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree. And I think it's true at lots of different scales. And can I just show you, go back to my slides 2 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Oops, if I can't, because now I've just managed to lose you. I'll just share something else, which is at the moment I'm working in a big interdisciplinary water research center in Cardiff, and I think that one of the real way you're demonstrating it at the individual, it is talking to each other across disciplines. And I think when it comes to freshwater challenges, they're so complex. That's what you said it. I've seen it so many times. They're so complex that I do not believe that you can address these through only one disciplinary lens at a time. And I think what we need is, to bring the social scientists, the engineers, the geographers, the biologists, to talk to each other, to become that supra network of people who actually talk to each other, to resolve these big things, these big questions. And I think it's true within organizations, but I think it's also true across organizations. And I think that the strength of your Global Water Futures, the strength of our GW4 Security Alliance, is that complementarity of expertise and that increased capability is what allows us to actually make a difference. And I think it's where I find that difference is best explained and best demonstrated, evidenced, is in this new generation that is coming up of students who I find fascinating because they are capable of having this really in-depth understanding of their own field, but at the same time have this sort of breadth of understanding of all these other disciplines that come into, like you, come into that the full, the holistic problem. And I think that that's really powerful, and that is what is, I think, going to make a difference.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. And yeah, there's lots of strengths in leveraging all those networks and different disciplines. So, Andrea, do you want to switch to questions from the audience if you have any?
Yes, thank you so much, Isabel and Jared. This has been fantastic, and I know you could both keep going back and forth because over our discussions, you have so many more topics to cover. But we do have one question already in the chat box, which I think is going to provoke some interesting discussion as well. And it's from Emily. And the question is, I have had a lattice approach to my career, but much of the advice we get if we want to enter academia is to focus and have a brand and sell that brand. Do you have advice about how to market yourself when you've had such a diverse background to academic hiring committees?
Yes, I think that is a really challenging situation or complex situation, which is that it's not always the case that people understand the value of this lattice experience. And I think that the way to present it is to say that, yes, there are several areas where, you have an in-depth understanding, but your particular strength comes from this more holistic understanding of what's going on. And that strength is being able to understand, to be at the interface and understand and link to others. And I think that, going forward, at all levels, even across sectors now, people are understanding that you can't deal with a whole sector on its own. If water utilities continue just to talk to water utilities and don't talk to farmers, they're never going to sort out their watershed issues. And so people who can work at the interface because they have multiple experiences, these are the people who we're going to rely on in the future.
I think that's a great answer, and I think it's definitely that importance of being able to communicate, and be able to educate people along the way too about that lattice approach. You have to share that with the world as well. And we have another question from John Pomeroy, which is for both Jared and Isabel, which is, how have you both worked to adapt and overcome the challenges that COVID has imposed? And what recommendations can you give to young professionals who are facing substantial challenges from it now? Maybe Jared, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I'd say finding new ways to keep up those engagement within your network. I think that's a challenge, but it also presents an opportunity because now we're able to connect with a lot of people who we might not otherwise been able to connect with before. And so I've known a bunch of people who've been able to, and myself included, I mean, there's ways we can engage in webinars and socials that way with different academic communities, different sectors as well. So it opens up that opportunity. And yeah, I think it's being able to communicate with a new audience of people. Isabel, I'm not sure if you have any other.
I mean, I completely agree. And just to give you an example, as you probably know, the Global Water Futures and the Water Security Alliance in the UK are joining forces, and we know we've just recently established a memorandum of understanding. And as part of that, we're very keen to try and connect the early careers from both countries together. And one of the first things we're doing is essentially trying to build a conference online, of course, bringing in these two communities and therefore the two sides of the ocean steering committee together, and that wouldn't really have been possible because it would have been really difficult for everyone to travel and meet up. And I think it does create new opportunities, and I think we should get hold of those as much as we can.
I think we've got time for another question here, which is from Seema Bahari. And she says, thank you very much to Isabel for the great subjects you mentioned about career paths. And this is a big issue for her as an international female academic who moved to Canada and is now feeling confused and lost on her path because she couldn't find an academic or industrial career while trying several paths. And so, feeling a bit confused and having lost self-confidence. Do you have any recommendations to, recover herself and her path? And especially maybe highlighting that international element would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think, I think confidence is one of the key words here. And one thing I find, besides organizations who can help you, I think the key is to go and get that support. And that support can come from lots of people. It could come from your family, your friends, or colleagues if you have colleagues who can help you. And being able to not being afraid to go and get that support. And it's I think it is that support that then might help you. Maybe other people who've gone through the same type of pathways, and they could probably help you to get to that next moment where you feel just enough supported that you can make the next step on your own.
Great. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions here coming through the chat? Thank you very much. Thank you for that. And if there aren't any additional questions in the chat at the moment, I have one final question that I'd like to ask you, Isabel, which is just picking up on that international theme. For young people, the young professionals that might be listening today, do you have any advice on seeking out international opportunities or how that might be part of someone's path and moving their career path forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of opportunities for travel grants or placements across the world, and I think they're usually rather not too complicated and too cumbersome to write these applications for travel grants and placements across the world. And I think there's a huge amount of them, by the way, between the UK and Canada. So I wouldn't hesitate if I were you. They're out there. If you need some links, I'm happy to help. And yeah, so as many as you can do, that's the way. And once you've done one placement, then people get to know you, and it's just easy to get from one to another.
Well, thank you so much, both Jared and Isabel, for your thoughtful reflections and for answering these questions today. The next Women in Water lecture series will be on March 18th, 2021, where we will be meeting with Diane DuPont from Brock University and Diana Karanja from Kohesu in Kenya. And we will please register for those events on the GWF webpage, and we look forward to seeing you there. And of course, I would like to thank everyone who has worked tirelessly behind the scenes to help make this Women in Water series success and possible for everyone to attend today and in the weeks to come. So I would like to thank Stacey Dumansky, Stephanie Merrill, Fred Rybin, Corin Schuster-Wallace, Yolande Chesson and Ronald Fournier for their interpretation, and Laura Belcito from National Captioning Canada for her captioning today.